Hello and welcome to So Easy Sewing's Granite City Block of the Month Block 11 class. For this block we will need fabrics 2, 5, and 8. First we will cut 32 3.5-inch squares. Next we need 16 2-inch by 12.5-inch rectangles. And 16 2-inch by 9.5-inch rectangles. Thirty-two 1.5-inch by 3.5-inch rectangles. And 32 1.5-inch by 2.5-inch rectangles. When it comes to cutting fabrics 5 and 8, there are two ways that you can go about it. You can cut each individual 1.5-inch square for each fabric and sew them all together. Or you can take your strips, sew them together, and then cut out your 1.5-inch strips. This will save you a lot of time piecing 1.5-inch squares later on. If you do decide to cut them all out individually, you will need 96 1.5-inch squares from fabric 5 and 104 1.5-inch squares from fabric 8. Since you do need more squares from fabric 8 than from fabric 5, you can always seam rip those off of your strip when you're done cutting them. And here are all of our pieces. To begin our piecing, we will need two 11F pieces and two 11G pieces. As you can see, sewing together 200 1.5-inch squares is going to be very time consuming. I recommend sewing together your strips and then cutting them at 1.5 inch to save a lot of time. Once we have our 11F and 11G squares sewn together, we are going to press them to the darker or 11G fabric. But if you sew your strips together, you can press the entire seam all the way down before cutting. Now we will sew our pieces together to create a four-patch. We will refer to this as Unit A. Remember to line your seams up against each other so that they nestle together. For pressing our seams for Unit A, we can press them in either direction or press them open. For our center 9 patch, we need 4 11F squares and 5 11G squares. As you can see, if you start out by sewing your strips together in sets of 2, then you will save a lot of steps when it comes to sewing together your 9 patch. You will only need to add an extra square to each row. And just like before, we want to press our seams towards our darker 11G fabric. When sewing the rows together for our 9 patch, we want to make sure that our seams line up and nestle together so that we always have those perfect points. Again, you can press your seams in either direction or open. I decided to press my seams out for this block. Now we're going to sew our borders onto our 4 patch. You want to make sure that you sew your borders onto the same side of your 4 patch every time. We will press our seams towards our E11 border pieces. We will now add our second border to our 4-patch using our 11D pieces. And again, we will press our seams out towards our border pieces. Next, we sew our rows together. We will need 2 4-patch pieces and 1 11A piece. For our center row, we will sew together 2 11A squares and our 9-patch square. And for our bottom row, we repeat our steps with 2 4-patch pieces and 1 11A square. When it comes to pressing our rows, we will press our first row with our seams towards the center, and then we will alternate in opposite directions with each following row. And when we go to sew our rows together, we will make sure that our seams line up and press against each other to help lock in place. When it comes to pressing your seams, you can press your seams in any direction you'd like. I found that it worked best when I pressed my seams out. Now for our borders. The pieces may be a little bit bigger, but we follow the same steps as always. We will take two 11C pieces and sew them to opposite sides of our block. And as always with our border pieces, we will press our seams out. And last, we will take two 11B pieces and sew them to the final two sides of our block. And all that's left is to press our last two seams. Congratulations, you finished your 11th block.